All right, guys, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the activity that we did in the last class period. Now, the last class period, I asked you to graph a whole bunch of functions. We kind of started out with ones where it had numbers on the inside of the parentheses, whether they were positive or negative. We then went through numbers on the outside, right? We combined them together to see how do they both happen that way. We looked at numbers that were in front, whether they were fractions or whole numbers, maybe depending on the way that you had it. And then we also looked at ones that had a negative there. So I just kind of want to summarize some of our findings there, all right? Especially since we don't have a chance to chat about that as a class. Now, when we're looking at this here, one of the big things I want to point out here is the general form of the absolute value function. So this right here is the general form of the absolute value function. Now, a couple points or a couple key notes here with these items is that X and Y is always just a point on the graph. So when we first started talking about this, hopefully you were using a T-chart to make that happen, to kind of see what was happening there. So X and Y, that's just a point on the graph. You could plug a number in for X. We could see what's happening there. And how that's just going to change Y. All right. The other three letters here, let's just kind of go through that here. So H, right? And that's what we're going to get to right here. H. H is, if you notice how it affected it, the two graphs that you had, or the graph that you had, whether it was positive or whether it was negative, it affected it in a horizontal transformation or horizontal shift, right? So the H shifted it horizontally. And if you noticed, whether you had a number like this, X minus 6, it always shifted, in this case, 6 to the right. In this one right here, Y equals X plus 4, it was 4 to the left, okay? Now, we want to make sure that we know that. It doesn't seem like this one would be 6 to the right and 4 to the left because of the sign in there, but we always want to use the phrase opposite of the inside, okay? Just to kind of tell us where we're going to start here, all right? The next one is the same idea here, all right? The next one is the K, which is what we're going to get to. The K had, again, some type of horizontal shift, right? But this, or excuse me, it didn't have a horizontal shift, but it had some type of shift. It shifted vertically. So in this case, Y equals the absolute value of X plus 3. It was a up 3 shift. In this case, Y equals the absolute value of X minus 2. It was a 2 down shift. So when I look at an equation, I need to be able to know kind of where it starts, right? And that's really what this whole goal is here, is knowing where something starts. So in this case right here, what direction would it move? 5? What direction would it move 2? Well, according to what we have, it would be 5 to the right and 2 up. So if I were to graph this on this graph right here, it looks like I would have 5 to the right, 2 up, and right here would be what we call the vertex, okay? And that's one of the definitions. The vertex is either the highest or the lowest point, depending on how it's shaped. Now, again, we can make a T-chart to find the rest of those. All right, the A, this is important here. One of them that you may have seen, and this could be also true for an integer, but right here, we could have seen some type of fraction. The A talks about how wide or narrow it is. All right. So the A is going to talk about how wide or narrow. If the absolute value of A is bigger than 1. So what I basically am trying to say is I'm not worried about whether it's positive or negative. If the number is bigger than 1, then the graph is skinnier. And that might be something that you saw. You had a wide V, excuse me, you had a V, and it was skinnier based on that, okay? If the absolute value of A is less than 1, okay, and we really want to say it's between 0 and 1, but again, if it's some number between 0 and 1, the absolute value graph is wider. All right, and so that could happen right here. So in this case, you can see how wide normal graphs are. Looks like I have right 4 and then up 7. So boop, there it is. And it looks like this is going to make it a little bit wider. Now, if we think about this, it's stretching it. So instead of just going up 1 and over 1, I would go up 1 and then over 2, up 1 and over 2. And the axis of symmetry, which is one of the definitions above, allows me to do this on both sides. So if you think about the axis of symmetry as a mirror, there is basically an imaginary line right here for this one, and that everything is reflected. For the one that I drew over here in black, it's right here. For the one in purple, see how everything is equidistant from that orange line right there. So that's what we call the axis of symmetry. And when I get that, I basically know that if I just do half of the graph, the other half looks exactly the same. The last thing that we talked about, or hopefully that you had a chance to look at, was this negative sign right here. And maybe you had a negative integer, maybe you had a negative fraction, but how does the negative sign impact it? All it does is it flips it upside down. Okay, so we're going to use these ideas not just for this topic, but we're going to use this idea of H, always shifting it horizontally, by the opposite, K, by shifting it vertically, by the same, opposite of the inside, same on the outside. We're going to take a look at the A right here. Okay, the A again talks about how wide or skinny it is, with the last one being the negative sign in the fact that it's always going to flip it upside down. All right, so take a look at the Math Excel and we'll be back soon.